Good morning, everybody. Bless you. All right, today, I think, as you know, here at the State Department, representatives of more than 40 members of the Counter ISIL Coalition assembled to review the campaign to date and explore ways that we can further accelerate the defeat of Daesh. This is the first joint ministerial of the global coalition focused on further degrading Daesh's global networks, ideology, resources, the flow of foreign fighters, their communications, and of course their efforts to attract new recruits. Yesterday, also, I think as you know, the Secretary hosted the pledging conference for Iraq, which raised over $2.1 billion from the international community, to include $316 million from the United States, funds that will provide Iraq with critical stabilization and humanitarian support. And I think you've seen the joint statement from this very successful effort. Also on Wednesday, Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Richard Stengel, hosted a meeting of the Counter ISIL Coalition Communications Working Group here in Washington, in coordination with the working group's co-leads, the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom. The meeting brought more than 25 coalition partners, the interagency and private sector representatives, to enhance cooperation, to counter ISIL's messaging and provide effective alternatives. As the amount of anti-ISIL content continues to eclipse pro-ISIL content online, the working group renewed its commitment to launching innovative international campaigns and expanding regional and global networks and accelerating global efforts to confront them in the information space. As the Secretary said earlier today, though, and I think it's an important reminder, you're playing the Pokemon thing right there, aren't you?
I'm just keeping an eye on it.
It's an important reminder. We know this won't be easy. We recognize it's a challenge, and we're clear-eyed about the work we still have to do. This is why we convene this important ministerial, and we'll continue to work with our coalition partners to defeat Daesh. Did you get one?
No, the signal is not very good.
Sorry about that. Brad.
I just wanted to ask first about the travel warning you guys just moved on Jeddah, which warned of a imminent threat against U.S. citizens.
Right.
Did you? Is this information that you have received from the Saudis, or information that you are passing to the Saudis right now?
Well, it's a security message, not a travel warning that our consulate put out in Jeddah. I'm not at liberty, as I think you can understand, to get into the specifics of the information which led us to issue this message, but obviously our consulate felt that the information they had was credible enough and serious enough to warrant sending that message out immediately. So again, I'm going to refer you to the language in the message really to speak for itself, and I'm really not at liberty to get into more detail at this time. The one thing I would say, though, if you don't mind a quick commercial, is this is exactly why we want people to sign up for the Smart Travelers program, to log on to travel.state.gov and sign up, because this is the kind of information that'll get pushed to you instantaneously if you're an American traveling overseas, and the kind of stuff we want you to know about.
Just can you remind me, this security message, this is not a generic threat. This is specific, actionable intelligence, and that's why you're warning people about it right now.
The message is very clearly written, and I think concise in making it clear that there is a potential specific threat to Americans traveling to Jeddah, and in particular public venues in Jeddah. So it's very specific to the location, and it makes it clear that that this is a potential threat to Americans there.
Why isn't this a I mean, you kind of emphasize that it's not a travel warning, it's a security message, but why isn't a travel warning? I mean, a specific, actionable, imminent threat is the most serious kind that you have.
Sure. Well, first of all, there is already a travel warning in place for Saudi Arabia that we issued only back in April, so just a few months ago. And as you know, at least we update them either circumstantially or sequentially, usually every 6 months or so. So I can't rule out that an updated travel warning could be in the offing, but it was a pretty recent one. And it also advised Americans to be vigilant as they traveled to Saudi Arabia. It didn't tell them not to go. It just advised them of the advise them of the potential for security issues there and to be vigilant as they travel. This security message is a completely different document that is based on more immediate concerns that we have in a very confined geographic location.
Is this a specific period of time or something like that? Because I would think that if there's, again, a specific, imminent, credible threat to Americans, that you would be like, don't travel there. I mean, that usually you do when you have something very specific. You warn against travel, at least for a specific period of time, or stay away from a specific period of time. The advice is kind of vague in terms of dealing how Americans should counter the threat.
Well, look, this information just recently became available to us. The consulate did exactly what they should do, which is get the word out to Americans there in Saudi Arabia, specifically in Jeddah. There wasn't a time limit put on it, nor do I think we would want to do that right now, just as we continue to try to get more situational awareness on the threat. But we felt that the information was credible enough and specific enough that it warranted an immediate security message. Obviously, we're going to watch this going forward very, very clearly. And as I said, we haven't updated the travel warning, but I can't rule out that that might happen going forward.
Could we change?
Go ahead. Yeah,
Change
you want
the subject?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you talk about what's going on in Turkey right now? I mean, the pictures of tanks rolling through the streets and also of people being let out of buildings with their hands behind their backs, some of them in blindfold. I mean, I just want to follow up on our questions to Secretary Kerry yesterday. 50,000 people rounded up, not just military and government officials, but university professors.
Sure.
I mean, is there a concern that even as you support their desire for an investigation, that this is heavy-handed and excessive?
Well, I think the Secretary spoke to that yesterday and made clear that we believe certainly the attempted overthrow of a democratically elected government by military force is wrong, and we condemned it, and we stand by that condemnation of this attempted coup. And he also talked about, and I think very frankly with you yesterday, talked about our concerns about due process and about moving forward in observation of not just the rule of law, but also Turkey's own democratic institutions as enshrined in their own constitution. And so he's already spoken to this, and I'd point you back to what he said yesterday because it's still valid today. Obviously, at least we're watching events as they unfold there, and our ambassador is engaged nearly constantly with his interlocutors there in Turkey. As you know, the Secretary spoke to the Foreign Minister 4 times in the last several days. So we're in touch with Turkish authorities, and we're certainly watching events closely.
Well, what the Secretary offered was kind of a cautionary note about the need to see the democratic process play out and that the Turks are mindful of all of that. What I'm asking is what you're seeing, the reports that you're getting internally and what you're seeing on TV, is that consistent with those? It seems very heavy-handed and excessive, and I want to know if you're concerned by what you see.
We've been concerned about the situation since the attempted coup, and that's why we're in touch with our Turkish counterparts. Again, as the Secretary said yesterday, I mean, we need to stay in touch with Turkish authorities and talk to them as they work their way through this. But if you're asking me to, put a bumper sticker on it today and characterize it one way or the other, I don't.
The White House said that Josh Earnest said that he thought that he realized why Turks must feel unease about what they're seeing. Do you feel unease about what you're seeing?
I would share Josh's points that obviously there's a lot of activity right now going on, and it's difficult for us to know with precision exactly every decision they're making and why they're making it. That's
50,000 people?
That's why we're going to stay in touch with them and monitor this as closely as we can going forward. Look, Turkey's not just a friend, they're a NATO ally. And we take the partnership with Turkey bilaterally and multilaterally. And I would remind you, the Turks are represented here today in this counter-ISIL coalition meeting. We take this relationship very seriously. And as I've said many times from the podium, even as friends, we're not we're not afraid to have candid, forthright conversations with one another. Those kinds of conversations are happening, and they'll continue to happen. But I just don't think that we're in a position right now, given these still early days, to broadly characterize everything that's going on and every
can I
decision
ask
that's being
that?
made. Nor,
Just one
wait a
more.
second, nor am I going to get into a daily habit of litigating every decision that they make as they make
Well,
it. They
without-
had a threat to their government, to their democratically elected government, and I think we can all understand that that kind of threat needed to be taken seriously, and we shared the deep concern over this attempted coup.
I understand that, but you're also, urging them to, calibrate their response. And it certainly doesn't look like they're heeding your warnings. And by not saying anything about any kind of disproportionate, the president pretty much said that he saw this as an opportunity to kind of craft down on dissent. And I'm wondering if you think that, being muted in your response is any kind of yellow or green light for them to continue and expand this crackdown.
Well, I disagree that we're being muted in our response. I just don't
Really?
simply share that.
You're not concerned about what you see in the streets when 50,000 people are being, the Europeans yesterday were very vocal at that press conference. Both the German and the Dutch foreign minister said, what we're seeing is really concerning to us.
And the secretary, and we have said all along, that we're
Secretary did
concerned.
not say that.
We're concerned. Obviously, we're concerned about what's going on in Turkey, and we're staying in close touch with Turkish authorities as they work through this. So, I think again, the secretary's made clear our concerns on both sides of the ledger, on the attempted overthrow of a democratic government by military force, and about our legitimate, very friendly concerns over democratic institutions in Turkey, and seeing that they move forward in a responsible way, guided by the rule of law and due process and their own constitution.
John, can I ask you, since you mentioned their own constitution, it's changing by the minute. Do you agree with the notion that the president should have extended powers for extended detention of specific suspects?
I'm not in a position to have full visibility on
What about-
legislative. Hang on a second, Brad.
Well,
legislative decisions that they are in the process of
I don't want to hear
making.
what you don't want to do. I want to hear what you can say. And since you didn't want to speak about the broad brushstroke, I'm asking you specific questions.
We are, look, as I said before, Brad, Turkey's democracy matters to us. We want to see, as I've said before, that they live up to the democratic principles that are enshrined in their own constitution as they work through this very tense, very anxiety-filled time, and we understand that. But I'm not in a
Do you support
position.
the right of the president to be able to pass laws without parliamentary approval?
We support the
That
rule-
seemed to be enshrined in the Constitution until recently.
As we've said before, we support the democratic principles that are enshrined in the Turkish constitution. Now, as they work through this,
Constitutions change,
as-
though.
well, Brad,
And they
I'm
are
not,
changing.
I'm not an expert on the constitutional changes that are occurring there.
Well-
I've seen press reports of decisions that they are preparing to make. As far as I know, no laws have yet actually changed. And so I'm not going to speculate, I'm not going to hypothesize, I'm not going to cast judgment on decisions that, that at least legislative decisions that haven't been made yet. We are in close touch with them. We're going to stay in close touch with them. Turkey matters to us as a friend and an ally. So does their democracy, and the will of the Turkish people obviously is important to us as well. So I'm just not going to again get ahead of things right now.
Have you looked at the provisions of the state of emergency, of the extra powers that it gives the government? There's a very long list, and I would say like a good 3/4 of them are against things that you say from this podium that you're against from other countries every day.
As I do in many other places
Ban the
around the
print and
world.
distribution of journals, magazines, newspapers. Can rule by decree. Order NGOs to cease operations for a specific period of time. Ban and restrict people from going or gathering in certain areas, both public and private. Search anyone or anything without authorization from a judge. These are things that from this podium, when another country would do it, you would say this is, a violation of human rights, not against democratic principles. Are these consistent with the democratic principles that you're preaching from this podium all the time?
I'm not preaching from the podium. I'm trying to articulate U.S. foreign policy and our
This
views.
seems pretty much not in accordance with U.S. foreign
Again, if
policy.
you just let me finish, then I'm happy to answer the question. We're watching this very closely, Elise, and as I also am mindful of doing from the podium, I don't comment about pending legislation here in the United States, and we
Well,
don't make it a habit.
The state of emergency is actually instituted right now.
I understand that they've issued a state of emergency, and again, given that the government was under a threat of overthrow by military force, it is not beyond the pale that they would have to make some decisions about law and order there in their country. We are in touch with them. We're going to stay in touch with them, and I'm not going to characterize each and every decision that they're making as they're making it. We need to learn more, frankly, about this pending legislation and about their intent going forward, and about how they're going to implement the state of emergency, for how long, with what measures, before we're going to be in a position to comment one way or
The
the other.
government said that the
specifically.
state, one more time, sorry. The government said that the state of emergency is being implemented to order the counter effect of the Gulenists, followers of, the Muslim cleric, who the government blames for the coup. So basically, in this state of emergency, they're giving themselves the powers to round anybody up that has anything to do with Gulen.
Obviously, we don't want to see excessive measures be applied, clearly.
And you don't see them being applied.
What I'm saying is, we're watching this closely and we're going to stay in touch with them, and we're going to register, if we have concerns, we're going to do that through diplomatic channels, and as we typically do with other countries around the world. But we're watching this very closely, and I'm not trying to be evasive here. Turkey.
Well, you seem like you are. I'm not saying you're trying to be, but you are being.
Fair enough. But again, Turkey matters to us as a friend and an ally. Their democracy matters to us, and we've said that many times. It matters so much to us that we are going to stay in close touch with them going forward. But again, we have to be also mindful, that they have gone through a significant emergency and a threat to their own democracy.
That's one point of clarification. In a lot of your statements and also in remarks, you've referred to the democratically elected government, but there's been very little said about whether you believe Turkey has a democratic government, not elected, just that it is a democratic government. Do you see right now the Turkish government as a democratic government?
We still continue to see Turkey as a democracy. Yes,
As a functioning democracy?
as a democracy.
A simple add on thing on this, then it is today, given that the coup was defeated, the greater threat to Turkish democracy comes from the threat of another insurrection or government overreach. Which is the greater of the two?
I'm
threats?
not in a position to be able to characterize that, Dave. I mean, I think any democratic government that faced what they faced just a few days ago, and let's be mindful of the calendar here. This wasn't that long ago. You can understand that they have a responsibility to investigate. They have a responsibility to hold those who are responsible for it to account. It's also reasonable to expect that they don't have perfect information. Again, I'm not justifying every decision that they're making, and I'm not or defending it. But what I'm saying is that I think it should be reasonable to anybody to understand that they would have to investigate and to look as widely as they feel they need to try to get at better information, more specific information about who was responsible and how they were able to get that far in their planning. So again, we've made clear our condemnation of the attempt. We've also made clear, and the Secretary was clear about this, about our concern about the rule of law going forward and due process. Those concerns on both sides of the ledger remain valid today as they did yesterday, and they will remain valid again going forward tomorrow.
He said he was concerned that the rule of law be respected. He didn't say that he was concerned that the rule of law is not being respected. Which is it?
He said,
No, he didn't.
at least he also said in his answer to you, that we're watching this closely, that we're in touch with Turkish authorities, and that we're going to work through diplomatic channels to make sure that we better understand what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Well, if you don't have concerns about what they're doing, then why would you need
I
better
didn't say we didn't
clarification?
have concerns. I've said numerous times in my exchange with you today that we're obviously concerned about what's going on. They do have a responsibility to hold those responsible to account.
Well,
As,
don't they
as
have a
you,
responsibility to do an investigation before they know who's responsible, before detaining 50,000 people?
and I believe that they are investigating. And again, the how and the process, obviously, we're watching very closely. Matt.
Let's say, I'm just in here for two very brief questions. It's a cameo appearance slightly.
Well, I'm honored nonetheless.
I got to get back to the conference call. One on Interlink. Yesterday, the secretary said that they had told, the Turks had told Ambassador Bass that the power would be turned back on within the next day or so.
Yeah, I don't have an update on the power situation at Innsbruck. I'd point you to DOD on that. I honestly don't know if we're still using auxiliary power or whether they've restored it. DOD would have a better sense of that than I would.
Well, yeah, except that it seemed to have been going through the ambassador rather than the military channel, so that's why, as far as you know, it's.
As far as I know, it hasn't been resolved, but again, I'd point you to DOD.
Okay, I had another one, but now I forgot it, and I have to go back to it.
Okay. You could just email it to Brad.
Yeah, do you
Okay, I get Turkey. Hang on. Yep, go ahead.
you have been talking about 50,000 this. What do you say about this blanket order? None of the academia can leave the country. The deans are being purged. Like where is the investigation? Is that democracy? What do you suggest to that?
I think, honestly, the exchanges that I've had here with Dave and Elise and Brad, I
I'm
would point you
asking
back to what I
specifically
said.
about the academia. It's a universities.
And I said, I'm not going to litigate every decision they're making while they're making it. What we're going to do is stay in touch with Turkish authorities. We've made clear our concerns, again, on both sides of the ledger here. And those concerns, as the Secretary articulated yesterday, remain valid. We're going to stay in touch and try to get as much clarity and as much context about what's going on there as possible directly with our interlocutors in Turkey.
And they have suspended the European Convention on Human Rights. Do you have anything on that? A democracy suspends human rights while an investigation starts?
Look, again, they had a significant threat to their democratic
still there?
government. They might believe that it still is. I don't know. You know, you're asking me questions, quite frankly, that are better asked to Turkish authorities. We're not involved in this investigation as they go forward. We understand they have a responsibility, an obligation, really, to get to the bottom of this and to hold those those that were responsible to account. I'm not going to, and I'll say it today, and I'll probably have to say it again tomorrow. I'm not going to litigate from the podium every decision that they're making and the progress of their investigation into this attempted coup. Those are questions that should be put, and frankly, ought to be put to the Turkish government to explain what they're doing.
Do you believe the Turkish government is treating journalists, they will welcome a question?
How many times from this podium have I in recent months talked about freedom of expression and press freedom in Turkey? I mean, we still have the same concerns over that as we did before.
John, first, do you have an update about the material that they sent regarding this the request, extradition request? They sent the Turkish
I
officials.
don't have an
sent-
update for you, as I think my colleague at the White House said that they have transmitted some documents, and we're still analyzing those documents.
So what's the timeline for this? When
You'd have to talk to the Justice Department. That's not an issue for the State
So he-
Department to adjudicate.
Yeah, he said that State Department and Justice Department are working on this case together. So it's up to Justice Department now.
It is. I mean, we're working with the Justice Department, but issues of specific extradition requests are handled through the Justice Department. Obviously, we inform that process. I just don't have an update for you today.
Did you have an opinion on this process about this? I mean, maybe it will be not, for example, seen as a request, an official request, or it will be.
We
an
have
official
offered.
request.
We have offered, as the Justice Department has offered, to assist Turkish authorities as they work through this extradition process. We've even offered to host a team, a Turkish team here, and or to send a team there. a joint team to help them work through the process. But as the Secretary said yesterday, and actually he said several times, if there is an extradition request, it's got to be based on evidence, not just
What
allegations.
was the response about this team?
I don't know that there's been a response.
So it will be a joint team, like Americans and Turks will be working together?
What I said was, we've offered to send a joint Justice and State Department team to Turkey, or to host one of theirs, a team from Turkey here, to help them work through the process.
They didn't respond yet.
I'm not aware of a response yet.
And the secondly, sorry. And secondly, is there any response regarding this assistant offer of Secretary Kerry in terms of this investigation going on this?
I'm not aware of any.
And yeah, it's if there will be an evidence that the federal judge will be asking during this trial, I'm wondering if there will be a responsibility of U.S. on this evidence.
I'm sorry, I didn't get
state.
that.
Secretary Kerry was very clear that U.S. will be expecting a concrete evidence instead of the allegations. I'm wondering if the U.S. also will have some kind of responsibility during this evidence stage while this alleged coup perpetrator is living in Pennsylvania, because I don't know how the Turks will present an evidence someone living in U.S.
I'm not really sure how to address your question. I mean, again, the Secretary said whatever, if there's going to be an extradition request, it's got to be based on evidence, not allegations. And
Yes.
as I said, they've submitted some documents that we're still analyzing it. I'm not in a position to characterize it further than that. I don't know what you mean by obligations of the U.S.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what's the meaning of evidence. So someone, for example, this guy alleged, the coup perpetrator.
It's simple.
This,
It would be
this brings
information
some
that
of its followers
specifically,
coupling.
information, just like evidence in any other kind of case, information that specifically links the individual to the events that occurred, specifically links. That's what we're
Yeah,
talking
but
about.
I'm talking about the top of this this Fethullah Gülen living in Pennsylvania. According to the testimonies, for example, that I read, there are some officers who admitted that they are part of this movement. But I don't know if in this extradition request it's about specifically this guy. And I don't know how they will present an evidence regarding
I
this
don't know
guy
either.
living in
Tolga,
Pennsylvania.
I don't know either. I don't know how I could possibly know that either.
But he's living in U.S. Do you have any responsibility in terms of the stability of an ally country? That's my question. In terms of a guy living in
We don't have a
Pennsylvania.
responsibility to help them gather the evidence and to help them and to write the request for them, if that's what you're asking. As I said, we would obviously consider, because of the treaty that we have an obligation to consider an extradition request. That consideration must be based on evidence,
Yes.
on solid evidence.
Yes.
That in this case would link the individual to the actual coup. Now, they've submitted some documents. I think you can understand that I am not going to, from this podium, lay out for you everything that they've submitted or what and how the Justice Department is considering it as they analyze it. There's a process here. It's a very specific legal process. We have offered, and this is not required, okay, but we did offer to assist them in the processing of the request, to the degree even to send a team there if they would welcome it. So we are working hard to show that we're serious when we say we're going to, we consider our treaty obligations seriously. And so, look, we're just at the beginning of this, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm not going to air out every single development in the process every day that we go forward.
Yeah, just to clarify, there are two different offers then. One for the investigation and then for this extradition request.
Yes, we did make the very night.
They didn't respond to neither.
I'm not aware of any specific request by the Turkish government for the United States to assist in their investigation of the coup or the processing of an extradition request. But yes, we made offers on both. And as I said, Tolga, we're in touch with Turkish authorities. We're going to stay in touch with them. And those offers were sincere, and we'll see where it goes.
John, can you just on the extradition? Can you just help us out? And if there's a determination made that it is a valid extradition request, are you going to share that with us, or will you announce that it's valid and that the next step is going forward?
That's really more of a decision for the Justice Department to make. And honestly, Justin, I'm not an expert on process here. I don't know what our obligations are with respect to disclosure on extradition. We typically, as you know, do not talk about specific extradition cases. It was a little unavoidable in this case because of the high public profile of the accusations that were made in the immediate hours after the coup, and the fact that we were asked outright in the wake of the coup about the treaty itself. We don't typically talk about that.
Just procedurally, though, once the court has made its decision, isn't there a final stage where the Secretary of State has to sign off on?
Secretary does
the
have
extradition?
a role in signing off
It's the
on
final
final
one, yeah.
decisions. Yes, that's my
But
understanding.
can I just get
But
to
it is as I answered the TOBA, it is largely a Justice Department owned process.
Until the final point.
Yeah, and now obviously we help inform it, and we are informed by it, and the Secretary does have an obligation at the end game. But again, guys, I just don't think it's valuable to try to get that far ahead of the process and where we are right now.
Well, just one more on this. So yesterday, the secretary, and the day before also in Europe, the secretary said that there's no evidence that this guy was responsible. That it obviously there's nothing right now, but that they would review the dossier. But the Turks have already everything we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes are under the pretext that this guy is responsible for the coup. He's launched a crackdown and has detained 50,000 people and instituted a state of emergency to crack down on anybody related to this guy in an investigation that you say so far there's no evidence of.
I can go back and
You don't
look.
have a problem with that?
I didn't say that. I said I'll have to go back and look exactly what the Secretary said. I don't believe he said there's no evidence to date. I think what he said was that
He said
that we will consider any information that the Turks provide us with respect to this case and to this extradition process, but that it has to be based on solid evidence and not simply allegations, as it would in any other extradition case. And number two, we've acknowledged that we have received some documents from the Turkish government. Those documents are being analyzed. I can't rule out that there won't be additional documentation forwarded by them. And so we're just at the beginnings of this process.
Okay,
and it
but if
can
you-
be, on occasion, can be a lengthy process of
Okay, but
determining.
if you're just square this for me. If you're at the beginning of the process, okay, and you say that you're hesitant to criticize the Turks for what they're doing because they still have to launch an investigation as to what's going on and who's responsible. Yet they already sent you a dossier that says that this guy proves that this guy was responsible for the coup. So those two things are not consistent.
My understanding is
See what I'm
that
saying?
they are investigating.
But they've
The
already
coup.
determined that he's
Well, they have certainly made public claims of their belief of his responsibility. As I understand it, and we spent, as you rightly pointed out, the first 20 minutes of this, if not longer, talking about the decisions that they're making. So agree with them or not, it would appear that they are still in the act of investigating. But yes, they have made public claims about his responsibility, and what we've said back to them is present the evidence and make it evidence that we can actually use in this process, and then we'll see where we go.
I've covered a few extraditions, and I always thought that you don't have to prove, to the American sense of without a shadow of a doubt of somebody's guilt to get an initial arrest. That once there's a lower bar and you arrest the guy so that you prevent flight, and then you allow time for the full investigation and a full extradition. So as long as Mr. Gulen hasn't been arrested, are we to understand that you haven't seen that low bar for evidence?
Again, I'm not an expert on law enforcement process. This is a better question for the Justice Department. I don't believe anybody ever said, and the Secretary certainly never said, beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Right.
He said it has to be, the request has got to be based on evidence. They have submitted some documents. We're analyzing them. I'm not going to characterize the degree of evidence in those documents while we're still in the process of looking at them.
Right, but at this point, you haven't done even the first step in an extradition process here in the United States beyond looking at paper?
Well, again, I'm not an expert on process in terms of what is or what isn't the first step.
Mr.
I can only
Blumen is
tell
a
you,
free- he's a free man. He can leave the country. He can do whatever he wants. Correct?
I'm not aware of any action taken against Mr. Gulan at this stage in the
Thank you.
process.
Change of topic?
Yes.
So Donald Trump in an interview has said, in essence, that NATO should pay for U.S. support so that if the Balkans haven't met their obligations to NATO, then the U.S. doesn't need to respond. Is this kind of position something that undermines the commitment to common defense?
Well, look, I think you know, Barbara, as I've said many times, I'm simply not going to comment on rhetoric by either of the presidential candidates, one way or the other. What I can tell you is that this administration's policy, as has been the policy of administrations before since 1949, is to hold firm to our commitments to the NATO alliance and to Article 5 specifically. Our commitments we view as ironclad. And I think that's about all I'm going to say on it.
A little bit related question to that?
But would a
Hang on a
position
second,
like
guys.
this, I mean, let's say it's not Donald Trump's position, but would a position like this mean it would be moving away from those commitments?
Again, I'm not going to characterize comments made by presidential candidates. I think you know very well that Article 5 means an attack on one is an attack on all. And we take that
commitments.
responsibility seriously.
Regardless of how much
When Article 5
percentage
is
of their budget.
invoked, it's an attack on one, is an attack on all. When it's invoked, the alliance comes to the assistance of the member attacked.
regardless of them meeting their 2% or whatever.
It's an absolute commitment, Elise. It's an absolute commitment, and again, our policy, which has been the policy of every administration since 1949, is to hold dear and sacred, quite frankly, that obligation and that commitment to the
So
alliance.
just for instance, if any one of the countries, one of the smaller countries who's having budgetary problems or whatever.
I can appreciate the hypothetical effort to try to get me to comment on Mr. Trump's statement.
Why
I'm just
won't
simply
you-
not
I
going to
mean,
do
your,
that.
Your boss did, several times, has commented on, some of the things that you're obviously getting calls of. You have 30 foreign ministers downstairs. I can't believe that some of them aren't saying to the secretary, that this is concerning, that if there's a new president in office, that they're worried that the U.S. will not meet their commitments to NATO.
Look, a couple of thoughts here. You're right. Foreign leaders have expressed concerns about things that they've heard on the campaign trail throughout the campaign. They've expressed their concerns, and the secretary's answer has been consistently the same. We're not involved in politics here at the State Department. We're not going to involve ourselves in election rhetoric. What we are going to involve ourselves in are pursuing the foreign policies of this administration, and the foreign policies of this administration are about being engaged and being active out in the international sphere, and about honoring our alliance and security commitments around the world. And they are significant. And when you look around at what's going on in the world, you can see that American leadership still matters. And the secretary firmly believes that, and that's what we're focused on, and that's our message to foreign leaders as he continues to travel. Now, I don't know who the next commander-in-chief is going to be. The American people will decide that, and that individual will have to make decisions for him or herself about the world around them and about how the United States is going to act in that world. That is not for me to speculate or hypothesize on or talk about here from the podium. All I can do is reiterate our policies and our views about our security commitments around the world.
Related to that, could I just ask about Japan and South Korea, the Trump comments about questioning the value of the troops there, whether there's been fresh diplomatic contact with Seoul and Tokyo concerning that, and whether the Secretary plans to reassure the Japanese and the South Koreans of our bilateral security commitments to them.
We constantly are in discussions with the Japanese and the South Koreans about our security commitments, our alliance commitments to them and to their security. I don't have any fresh conversations to read out for you, but obviously our diplomats in both countries remain constantly engaged with them. And you asked something about, did you ask about THAAD? Was that part of your question?
No, just the troops.
Oh, the troops, the troops' presence. Again, look, I know of no discussions or decisions pending one way or the other. We obviously have robust military presence in the Asia-Pacific theater. That is a part of the rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region. And again, this administration's view with respect to that region is that it remains vital. We are a Pacific power. Secretary of Defense Carter has spoken to our obligations there. Secretary Kerry has spoken to it. And I see no changes on the horizon on that front because we believe, again, that the very real security challenges and, frankly, economic opportunities that are resident in that part of the world require a strong, robust U.S. presence, not just militarily, but diplomatically and economically as well. Again, that's one of the reasons why the Secretary will be heading off to the ASEAN Forum soon. It's why we continue to be strong advocates for TPP, and it's why, again, our U.S. military is focusing more and more of their energy and efforts in the Asia-Pacific region. Yeah, Samir.
Do you have a readout about the Libyan foreign minister meeting with Assistant Secretary Patterson?
Let me see. I can tell you that the Libyan foreign minister did meet with Assistant Secretary Patterson, and as I understand it, it was a good meeting about, again, reiterating our support for the government national accord and for moving the process forward.
Do you have anything? Sorry, Samir, were you going to follow up? Go.
Did they talk about the Libyan government complaint about the French troops in Libya?
Look, I don't have much more of a detailed readout than that. Again, I just say that we remain committed to working with Prime Minister al-Sarraj, the GNA, and the UN's Special Representative Martin Kobler, and continue to fully support the Prime Minister as he continues the crucial work of addressing a full range of Libya's political, security, counterterrorism, economic, and humanitarian challenges. I don't have a more specific readout than that.
Do you have
Sure.
any concerns about the presence of French troops alongside General Haftar's forces?
Look, again, I'm not privy to French deployment of troops. I think that's really an issue for French authorities to speak to. We've made clear.
The policy is to support the government of national accord.
Again, I'd let the French characterize their military deployments.
But
I don't even characterize American military deployments. This is really for the French to speak to. We do continue to support the GNA and, more importantly, the political process going forward in Libya.
Do you have anything on an American fighting with the YPG killed in Syria?
I am aware of reports. Hang on a second. I want to make sure I get this exactly right. If I had an iPad, this would be a lot easier. And now I've done it. I've completely messed up.
You could catch Pokemon.
Huh? Let me just make sure I get this right at least.
Apparently the YPG put out a statement about it. So.
We're aware of reports that a U.S. citizen was killed while fighting in Syria. I don't have additional information to share.
Because of privacy laws or because you don't know?
Well, again, there's privacy considerations that are refraining me from speaking further. But it would refer you again to the Department's Syria travel warning, where we strongly discourage, I should say, private U.S. citizens from traveling to Syria to take part in the conflict.
Well, but you don't need to speak about the specifics of the case and the person's name and those specifics. But are you? I mean,
I'm
you're
aware
talking,
of reports.
But are you aware of a death?
I'm aware of reports that a U.S. citizen.
The
was
Privacy
killed.
Act does not govern the fact that you say that you can say that there's a death. It just says that you can't talk about how he died or anything.
Well,
like
I
that.
appreciate the tutorial on the Privacy Act. As I said,
Does it apply to dead people?
as I said, privacy considerations are refrain me from providing more information right now.
Do you have anything on an American citizen that was detained in Iran in May? Or no, he traveled to Iran in May and was detained in July when trying to leave the country?
seen reports of the possible detention in Iran of a person reported to be a U.S. citizen. We're looking into this. I don't have anything additional at this time.
Again, is this about privacy considerations, or you just really saw the reports and are looking into them?
Really saw the reports and looking into them.
Can I change the subject for 1 second?
Since it's an American.
Sir?
How are you looking into this? Have you asked the
I'm not-
protecting power to, you can't say if you've asked your protecting power to contact the Iranian government?
I've seen reports of a possible detention in Iran of a person reported to be a U.S. citizen. We're looking into it, Brad, and I just don't have additional detail at this time.
A few questions on coalition strikes in Syria, please. The U.S. strike that reportedly killed around 20 civilians in the ISIL-held city of Manbij in Syria, was it a mistake on Monday?
That's another great accusatory question you've asked here. I think Secretary Carter has already addressed this issue. Obviously, we take all reports and allegations of civilian casualties very seriously. There isn't another military on the planet who takes the due care that the United States military does when acting with precision, and when things go wrong, we investigate it and we're transparent about it. And again, I'd point you back to what the Secretary of Defense said himself, that they're taking this seriously, they'll look into it.
What exactly is being investigated? The number of deaths, or whether that whether
You'd have to
there was
talk
an
to
attack or
DOD,
not?
but I suspect that what he meant was that they're looking into the veracity of reports about civilian casualties. And just to be clear, one is one too many. And we take each and every single instance seriously. So it's not about the number. And don't for a minute think that we take any particular number more seriously than any other. We don't want to cause any collateral damage. We don't want to cause any harm to civilians. And when we do, unlike so many other militaries in the world, we fully investigate it and we report what we find. And then we take steps to act on the lessons learned so it doesn't happen again.
In January, when the U.S. bombed a building in Mosul with huge amounts of ISIL's cash, U.S. officials told CNN that the commanders had been willing to consider up to 50 civilian casualties from the airstrike due to the importance of the target. Is that the approach? Is the U.S. willing to tolerate certain numbers of civilian casualties for high-value
Look,
ISIL targets?
I've seen the same press report you. As a veteran myself of 30 years, I could tell you that one is one too many, and the United States military goes out of its way to great pains to avoid civilian casualties of any kind.
Are you saying U.S. officials could not possibly say such a thing to CNN? So is that
You're asking me to comment on anonymous sources, and I'm just simply not going to do that. I've seen the same press report of you, which is, by the way, pretty old. I can tell you from my own personal experience in uniform that no other military works as hard as ours. None. No other military in the world to prevent civilian casualties. And when they happen, again, I'll say it again because apparently it didn't sink in the first time. When it happens, we investigate it fully and completely. And then we're transparent about it. And then we take the lessons learned and we try to prevent it from happening again. There isn't anybody else who does that.
the policy is not zero tolerance for civilian casualties, is it, at this point?
I've already explained to you our policy and our approach to civilian casualties. I don't think I need to explain it any further. Yes, sir.
Just
Yes,
the
sir.
day after the
In
Monday strike?
Brazil
Yes, sir.
today,
Just
Yes,
the day
sir.
after the
10
Monday strike?
in Brazil
French
today.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
10 people have been arrested, accused of possible involvement with a terrorist plot
Yeah.
during the Olympics.
Yeah.
Is the American government helping in the investigations, and will the State Department change recommendations for those willing to travel to Rio?
So we've seen the reports of these arrests. Let me sort of approach this a little bit differently than your question. I'm not aware of any U.S. involvement in this investigation on these arrests. And I would point you to law enforcement authorities for further information about that. I'm not aware that we're assisting in the investigation at all. Obviously, we are always concerned about the safety and security of American citizens abroad. We're certainly concerned about that with the upcoming Olympics. We have confidence in Brazilian authorities to take the steps, and we know that they are taking steps to make these Olympics safe and secure. They are working very, very hard. I think almost 90,000 security forces now that they have in place to make sure that people can enjoy the games in a safe environment. So we have very a very high level of confidence in their ability to deal with this and to see the Olympic Games process safely and securely for everyone. And we applaud their work on this arrest, and we know that they've made clear themselves that they'll fully investigate this. Again, we'll await to see the results of their investigation and their work.
You're changing recommendations for Americans planning in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get. No, there's been no changes to any sort of travel recommendations with respect to the Olympics. We believe that Brazilian authorities are on top of this. I think today's arrest is an indicator of the degree to which they take this very seriously. And again, we're confident that they're going to be able to hold and to secure a safe environment for the Olympic Games. Obviously, we're like every other country involved. We're going to stay vigilant here. It would be irresponsible not to continue to look at things very, very carefully, given that it is such a widely attended public series of events. And so we're going to stay lashed up and close connected to authorities in Brazil going forward. Okay? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My question is about Malaysia. Yesterday, a forfeiture action was initiated to try and recover assets looted from its sovereign wealth fund. And my question is, what are the present ramifications of American foreign policy towards Malaysia because of this? And very specifically, what would be your posture towards any proceedings, legal proceedings, related to the Prime Minister, related to the head of government?
So let me do it this way. I'll tell you that we're in contact with the Justice Department about this announcement of a seizure of U.S.-based assets of Malaysian nationals. This is primarily a case for the Justice Department to speak to, not for the State Department to speak to. What I can tell you is that Secretary Kerry and senior State Department officials have consistently raised our concerns about fairness, transparency, and the rule of law in many countries as essential factors in successful anti-corruption efforts worldwide. But for specifics about this, I really need to point you to my colleagues over at the Justice Department.
Thank you.
Jenny.
Thank you very much. On SAD, the South Korean citizens oppose of SAD place in South Korea. This is currently a hot issue about SAD system at the electromagnetic effect affected the human body. Did the United States give any notice to South Korea about the risk of a SAD system? It affected the human
Did they
body.
give any? I'm sorry.
Did they give
to Seoul?
Yes.
About possible site locations for the system?
No, not site of locations. It is like electromagnetic, kind of, affected human body.
Oh,
So that
you mean the parameters of the system itself? Yes, of course. I mean, our two militaries have been discussing this now for quite some time in terms of the capabilities of the system all the way through it. Again, I'd point you to DOD for more detail on that. I'm not an expert on the system.
I think a colleague's asking about possible public health effects of the electromagnetic.
We've been in touch with, I know we've been in touch with ROK officials about the system itself and the capabilities of it. I don't know, if you're asking me about electromagnetic
Yeah.
issues and public health, I don't know. I'll have to see if we can
Well,
find
you're
out for you, but I
military
think it's really more of a
background.
question for DOD.
you know more than them. You have
Me?
military background. Though.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't have a background in
There's
this.
actually in this room magnetic.
Yeah.
Electromagnetic.
Yeah.
I don't have a background in this system with any great specificity. But look, I mean, we obviously take let's not forget, the reason we're having discussions about the system is because of the threat that the DPRK continues to pose to the people of South Korea. And as I said earlier, in a different answer to a different question, we take our security commitments in the region very, very seriously. And we have been in constant communication and consultation with South Korean officials, both on the diplomatic side and the military side, about the system and its capabilities. Whether we've addressed this specific issue, again, I don't know. I'll try to find out for you, but it's also, I would encourage you to also ask our colleagues at the Defense Department. I've got time for just one more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so back to Turkey for a second. Are there any concerns that the reaction to the coup and the crackdown that involves so many members of the military will impact Turkey's role in the anti-ISIL coalition?
I think the Secretary addressed a little bit of this yesterday. I mean, the Turkish government itself has assured us that there won't be any negative developments based on their ongoing investigation to their contributions to the counter Daesh coalition. We haven't seen any degradation in Turkish support thus far. Obviously, we certainly want to continue to see Turkey contribute to the efforts as they have in the past. And as I said many times, well before the coup, we're always looking for ways to try to improve that cooperation, and our efforts to do so are going to remain. And I just reiterate that the government of Turkey was represented here, not at the ministerial level, of course, but they were represented here today in today's discussions.
Are you giving them any messages in terms of, it seems like analysts are saying that the government and the intelligence services are more focused on sort of keeping an eye on their own military now than on finding, threats from ISIL.
Again, I'm not going to characterize the degree to which they are every step of the way as they investigate this. But it was. But hang on a second. It was.
Whether you're sending, whether the U.S. is sending them messages regarding, asking them to do anything specific with regards to.
I'm not going to talk about
to the ISIL situation.
I'm not going to talk about diplomatic conversations. Again, they've assured us. So a couple of points here. They've assured us that there's not going to be any negative developments about what they're doing to the counter coalition effort, and we're going to counter ISIL coalition effort. Sorry, and we're going to stay in close touch with them going forward. We haven't seen any degradation to this point, but let's remember that the attempted coup was led by and with elements of their own military, so that they are taking a hard look at their military. And talking to leaders in their military should not come as a surprise to anybody. But again, they've made clear that they're going to stay committed to the effort, and that's certainly our hope and expectation going forward. Thanks, everybody.